record. Got the steps down by now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to session number 3. This is the final day of the Lacrosse Goalie Summit 8. I'm here with Coach Rachel Vallarelli. Coach, how are we doing today?
Doing good, doing good.
All right. We were talking before we hit record here. You were one of the original Goalie Summit presenters. I don't know if you remember that. That was a long time ago. It was COVID time.
That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me back, though.
Of course, we tried a couple times, didn't make it work, but I'm happy to have you back for Goalie Summit 8. This is going to be awesome. Who's here with us in the chat? If you could say hello to Rachel, name, age, and where you're tuning in from. I always like to see the names. Ron, 66 from San Diego. Ron, welcome. Sammy, 14, California. We got any? Where you at? You're in the New England area, yeah?
Me?
Coach, yeah.
Yeah, Hartsdale, New York. So Westchester County.
Westchester County. We got any Westchester County folks? Probably not, but any New York folks, we'll see. So a lot of folks tuning in. A couple announcements before we get started. I'm going to go full screen there. What do we got? Replays are going to be available. Replays.goaliesummit.com. 24 hours, you can get the replays. I think you guys have heard the spiel, so I'm going to go pretty fast. Highly recommend getting the VIP pass, though. laxgoalierat.com/VIP to get that. You get lifetime access. Thank you to Deep South. Thank you to Warrior. Thank you to String King. Thank you to ECD, East Coast Dyes. Thank you to Guardian Gear. Thank you to the Lax Shield. And I feel like I'm missing one. Deny Goalkeeping. Those are the sponsors. They help this event go. Thank you to Lax Goalie Rat intern Michael Adebato in the chat, dropping in the links. And there's a Q&A box. So as we get into the presentation from Coach Rachel, if you guys and girls have any questions, drop them in that Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. If they're relevant, I'll interrupt and we'll hit it right away. But if not, we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. Okay. I'm fired up for this one. This is going to be great. Coach, let me bring you back in. I think the crew is warmed up. Whenever you're ready, let's do it.
Awesome. All right. Sometimes I'm not tech savvy, so here we go. Hoping for the best here.
Well, that seemed to start right up. I think we might call you tech savvy from now on.
There we go.
Hold on, you haven't gotten into presenter mode yet, so maybe I spoke too soon.
I know we're getting there. Hold on. The computer decides to listen.
There you go.
All right, perfect. Okay. So I'm normally a very positive person, so bad habits and how to fix them. I was like, we got to add the how to fix part. And I decided to kind of take a little bit of a different route with this. Instead of really just focusing on, goalies stick their butt out or they're too wide or doing things like that. I kind of focused on some different areas of being an athlete and specifically being a lacrosse goalie. So any questions, it's a little content heavy. Just let me know. All right. So a little bit about me. I kind of do a lot. So I just figured I'd kind of put it all out here. So I've been playing field lacrosse since I was in 7th grade. I've been on Team USA. I played pro women's lacrosse. I still do. And I played at UMass, and I hold NCAA conference and school records there. And I also put my middle school and high school in here as well. I was at Holy Child in Rye. Men's lacrosse, rest in peace to Major League Lacrosse. I was a free agent, fun fact. And I played for the Central California Lacrosse Club when I lived out there too, out in California. So some pretty cool news. I also play men's box lacrosse, and I play professionally. I just signed a few weeks ago a contract in the PBLA with the New England Chowderheads, and I'm the first woman to do so, which is pretty cool. Go on to NLL, the Arena Lacrosse League. I was the first woman drafted into that up in Canada, which is pretty cool. And then some of my other teams are on here as well. So I coach a lot, play a lot. Most important thing, I have a ton of fun. And I think that's, the other part that I want to get through to everybody today too. I also run my own business, RV Lacrosse, where I do in-person and virtual trainings, events, all that kind of stuff. Basically just involved in everything lacrosse wise. And I'm a club director as well. And I was a college coach for 8 years, and I recently stopped that to focus on my own endeavors and playing. Some other things as well. I don't want to bore everybody here with everything. I also do photography and media, which is a fun fact. So I'm a little artistic. I'm on the board for Able Athletics, which is really, really cool. And the director of volunteers for that. So it's lacrosse for everybody. All right. And kind of getting into the meat of some things. I think, for anybody going through stuff, whether you just kind of looking at who you are as a person, a player, those kinds of things, right? It's important to know who you are, right? And kind of what makes you you. And so I wanted to add my coaching philosophy and like what I call my pillars for where I coach, when I coach, right? And I think the most important thing out of this, I know it's a lot of words and I don't want to bore anybody, but just really having a strong say do, right? Knowing that your actions speak louder than your words. I know, we're going to talk a little bit, going into bad habits and how to fix them. And I think that that's something that's super important, is knowing that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, and your body language as well. And then these are just some of my core values. Again, kind of going into looking at, who I am as a coach, who I am as a person, who I am as a player, right? Things that have helped me get to where I am today, things to kind of help me when I'm maybe going into those kinds of bad habits and stuff like that. Now we got the meat and potatoes. Okay. So what I'll say is bad habits. Okay. We fall into a few categories here. Okay. So we have physical, what I'll call physical, right? Which is really more gameplay. Okay. Mental, which I think about more is the internal. Emotional is external. I know emotions can also be internal as well, but what I'm focusing on there is more of how you show them. I am Italian. I talk with my hands. If my last name did not give it away. I should probably sit on them, to be honest, so that I don't, but some other things as well, some habits, right? Training, right? Strength, mobility, mental, and recovery, like reaction time. The other thing I forgot to add in there as well is running is also a great thing to do for goalies. But as you can tell, I also am not the world's biggest fan of it, so I even forgot to put it in my presentation. Nutrition, sleep, and recovery is also super important, and your coachability and level of sportsmanship. Okay. And we fix this through what I'll call habit loops and anchor thoughts. But I think a big thing to kind of keep in mind is that you can't manage what you don't measure. And what I mean by that is, even think about it like cooking. I can't cook to save my life. I truly can't. Even like microwavable mac and cheese, it explodes in the microwave. If anybody has gone to a summer camp of mine that's an overnight, I have to give that to another coach. I'm just not able. Everyone has their talents, is what I like to say. But if you don't measure the amount of water that goes in, right, you can't manage it. All right. So, or even making a cake or anything like that, if you don't manage the ingredients, right, you don't measure them out, you don't know how it's going to taste, how it's going to be. So does anybody have any questions? I see something in the Q&A. If anybody's got anything.
It's just a question that we've been asking every goalie or every coach, every session, which is what made you want to play lacrosse and specifically goalie?
Ooh, okay. For me, not a glamorous story. I wanted to play lacrosse. I had a family friend that played, and I was like, well, if he plays, I can play and I can be better. And he wasn't a goalie, and I didn't go set out to be a goalie. But what happened is I went to my first 7th grade practice, and I had a stick and I had goggles and all of these things. And non-goalies are now blessed with field sticks, especially on the women's side. It's just, they're not tennis rackets anymore. So it's a lot easier to throw and catch now. But back in the day, it was so hard for me to throw and catch. And one of my bad habits back then was that I had a little bit of I'll call it a short fuse. And I kind of went into freak out mode a little bit, and I was like, I can't catch and throw with this. Right. And mentally, it just kind of like, I was like, I can't do it. And then I went up and I talked to my coach about it. And I was like, hey, I can't catch and throw with this. Do you have a bigger stick? And, the assistant coach was like, yeah, you can be the goalie. And I was like, that's great. Is the stick bigger? And they're like, yes, it's bigger. I was like, that's awesome. And she's like, okay, it's a little different. And the head coach is like tapping her, like, we have a volunteer, like, let it go, right? Just let her do it. She was going to tell me how it's different. And I was like, I was a soccer goalie. Don't worry about it. And they're like, okay, it's totally different than that. And then the rest is kind of, I guess history, as they say. I was not the world's greatest. And looking back at when I first started, there's a picture of me in a hockey, just a regular hockey mask, just for a regular skater. I had shoulder pads. They didn't even give me a chest guard, elbow pads, these old leather gloves, and I had a stick that was strung with leathers. So like very old school. So that was back in the day. And then, yeah. So, and I wore glasses then. The rec specs didn't fit with those. It was crazy. Now I wear contacts. So we're good.
Love it. Awesome.
But so that's how I started playing. But yeah, so, okay. Habit loops and anchor thoughts. Okay. So a habit loop, creating your routine. It could be for lacrosse or outside of lacrosse. So things that you do every day to help build positive habits, right? And you can use it as a superpower, is the way that I like to think about it. So anything, as simple as, your routine of, you get up, you go to the bathroom, you wash your face, et cetera, right? Like those kinds of things. For me, the next step is, walking my dog, coffee, water, right? Like thinking about all those things. I'll work out, shower, et cetera, and go through my day. Right. So that's a habit loop of just like a general thing. I'll then journal, right? And then I do things for my business, or I have, my coaching, like my clients and stuff that I'll work with. So those are like, that's a habit loop, every day. That's what's happening, right? I have a bad one that's in there of checking my phone while I'm in bed, and I'll work on my phone. And that's so bad. I've talked to, a few people about it, and my sports performance coach, he's like, no, like you want to carve out time for specific things. That's not what that's for. And I'll do it before I go to bed too, which is, I don't recommend that. Right. So even I have bad habits that I need to fix. Right. And so an anchor thought, what I think is really cool about these, it's a positive memory or thought that brings you back to focus. Right. So you can use it as a superpower again. So when you're playing, if you're running into a situation where, you're not doing your best, or you want to do better, and you need something quickly to pull you back, right? Some people tell you to be like Dory, right? That was some feedback that I got when I was in college. Rachel, be like Dory. I was like, wait, doesn't Dory forget so fast? And my coach was like, that's the point, right? Be like Dory. So that was something I was like, okay, be Dory, boom. And that was my anchor thought while playing, right? Maybe sometimes you're in the middle of a test for school, and I know it's holiday break, right? So I don't want to be thinking about those things, but maybe something in life isn't going really well, and this is something positive that can help bring you back. Another thing is like me being with my dogs. That's another fun thought, and something that, is an anchor for me too, right? And being with family. And going back to habit loops quick before we move on, right? Looking at where you are with like your pre-game routines or pre-practice routines, right? What are the things like, for me, before I'm playing, I'm like, okay, I have to, mix my electrolyte drink that I have, while I play. I have to wear, my game day spandex. I have to wear, my game day shirts, right? I'm very like, this is what I'm doing kind of a thing. So I stick to that. So that's my habit loop for playing, right? I listen to my pregame playlist, right? We got the music going, we're ready to go. Everybody has those habits. You put, a certain, sock on first, shoe, et cetera, right? That can all be, a habit loop, per se, or a routine. It's just a different way to classify it.
Hey, Rachel, we got some youngsters on, 8, 9, 10,
Yes.
11. At what age do you think, if you go back a second, at what age do you think it makes sense to start with that routine, creating that routine?
I
Is it?
think I think it's good to do it, even with simple things, right? Like even like a goalie warm up, right? Getting a certain amount of shots in each spot, stuff like that. So I think the biggest thing to think about is that it takes a while to build up that routine, right? I think the saying is that you have to do something, 12 plus times for it to sink in, excuse me.
Mhm.
So something just as simple as, okay, I'm gonna, instead of tossing stuff in the car the day before practice, like, or, right before you leave for a practice or a game and hoping it's all in there, maybe the night before you're checking it, right? And just kind of creating, you can consider it a to-do list as well. All right. Stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I think it varies and changes as you get older. I think, looking at I wouldn't have called it a habit loop in college. I took a sports psychology class for my master's. So that's where a lot of this kind of stuff is coming from too. Um, and it was very rigid with, I listened to this song at this time at this away game because I knew when we hit the Dunkin' Donuts on the corner, going into UConn, I knew we were 8 minutes from the facility and I needed to play this song and I was so rigid. And, now in life, I'm like, it's good to be a little fluid within that system too. So,
Mhm.
I think things grow and change with you. So it's awesome to start it, as soon as you want to, kind of build that and get used to it, and it'll grow and adapt as you do.
Love it. One thing I love about routines is it really quiets your mind. If like you're going into a pregame, let's say you have a pregame routine or even a game day routine, right? Now all of a sudden I don't need to think about what am I going to do? What am I going to, you know what I mean? Like it eliminates a lot of these worries because I can just kind of go on autopilot and go through this routine that I know and trust, knowing that like when I get done with that routine, I'm going to be ready for this game.
Yeah. And I
All right.
think the other thing too, to kind of go off of that, I think routines are great, but sometimes realizing that you're not going to have as much time to get that routine in, right? I play professionally. We'll have a certain amount of time for warm-ups and things like that, or a facility will open, a certain amount of time beforehand to get there. But, I was in the middle school and high school and, days where, okay, coach, came from work late and, or the bus broke down or got lost and you only have 10 minutes before you play, there's that other thought that you have to also be able to say, hey, I'm going to be okay if I don't get all of my, if you want to consider it a checklist, right? All of those items done. You kind of have to have that alternative one in your back pocket, in case of emergency, break glass. This is how I'm going to move forward. And I found that that's really hard to do and to shift away from. But if you can be a little more flexible and nimble with that, it's going to really benefit you.
Love it.
All right. So going back to how I kind of described everything, right? So bad habits. Okay. So this is some physical stuff, right? And again, it's a lot of words. So if anybody has any questions, pop them in the Q&A section so Coach Damon can stop me from talking and we can get some conversation going. Okay. So something I consider so important in your physical game is, there's a lot of different ways and styles that people play, right? I'm not going to come on here and tell you, play this wide and stand this tall and get your hands here and things like that, right? Everybody plays differently. And something that I like to tell all of my goalies is I'm here to make you the best you. I'm not here to make you me. Although and I can kind of talk about it at other points too. I've been, there's times where I've had coaches tie my legs together. I've had coaches tell me to lock my legs, not just in a drill, but also to just do it, in live play. I've had people tell me to hop to the ball, like physically, like a bunny. Literally, it's like the whole kitchen sink. I've had so many different ways. I'm like, I can probably raise my hand if we were going and saying, oh, somebody's told me to do this. Yep. But my non-negotiable in the world of lacrosse, especially in goaltending, right, is being able to move pipe to pipe and through the pipes to make saves. And so what I mean by that is the goal is 6x6 in field, and a lot of goalies will just step to where they think the ball is going. But at the end of the day, there's so many different factors that will change the trajectory, excuse me, of where the ball goes, right? We want to make sure that we are exploding through it and stepping through. Okay. So I like to get my back foot on the pipe in the direction that I'm moving so that I can outlet the ball out faster. And again, I know I said that I like to do that. I'm very strong, and I can explode from one side to the other pretty fast. So that's something that works really well for me. And again, younger goalies, it's going to be a little bit harder, but work on that one step, and that, I call it a hop. Don't hop like a bunny, but corral your feet through. There's a lot of different ways to describe it. And coaches use different verbiage, but it all, for the most part, kind of boils down to the same thing. Right. And what I mean by that, attack the ball, lead with your hands, right? And get your eyes, head, hands, and your body to the ball. And you want to do it in that order. I think that's the most important thing. You got to track the ball with your eyes. Okay. Another bad habit, right, is not having a ready position or being uncomfortable in cage, right? And so I'll go back to what I was saying before. Experiment with different stances and watch and evaluate goalies, both men's and women's, to find what works best for you. I play men's field, not as much as I play, women's. And, I think when I was growing up when I really got into lacrosse was, mid 2000s, and I graduated from high school in 2011, as you all saw, and women's lacrosse wasn't really on TV. And the awesome thing is that's changing now, and the game is changing, but I modeled my game off of what I saw. Right. So I grew up watching, Scotty Rogers, John Galloway, and I was a big fan of Morgan Lathrop as well. Morgan played at Northwestern. She played for the club team that I played for, and was a local goalie. She's from a few towns over from me. So those were the people that I watched, and they all played explosive, this great style. But the cool thing is they're all different. Right. So I kind of piecemealed and Frankensteined and figured out what works. Right. And then what I mean by that is figure out, we're at the end of the week. You've all probably been on a bunch of this stuff, or you're going to watch them, right? Everybody's touched on, low, mid, high arcs, right? And the difference in those stepping, right? Where you hold your stick and the base for your legs, right? Those are things that you got to kind of figure out, and your angles. I know we have a question in there.
We certainly do, from Megan. Good questions, very good questions. So she's still a developing goalie. She's been coached by several different goalie coaches, and she's still figuring out what style is best for her. And I was wondering how long it took you to figure out how you play your best.
Ooh, that's a really good question. So my mom, when I was telling her that I was doing this, she was like, oh, tell them all about tools for the toolbox, honey. And I was like, I will, Mom, don't worry. And so I thought she was crazy. I love her dearly. And if she sees this, she's going to be like, I am not crazy. You've got to be kidding me that you said that. But every coach, and I talk about this later on too, but I'm happy to answer it now. Every coach, whether they know a lot about being a goalie or don't, have really good tidbits to add to your game, right? So you have to kind of figure out what works best for you. I think it depends on who you're playing as well, right? So you got to get to that comfortable spot of, you're young, you're growing, you're developing, okay, and figuring out like more concrete. This works, this doesn't. And I think that the big thing is you got to give it a little bit more time than just one drill, right? Or my example of how I played lacrosse, like started playing. Oh, I can't catch and throw. That was about 30 seconds that I gave it. I probably should have tried, a little bit longer, but I don't know. As they say, the rest is history, right? So I learned from that experience, but give yourself time, to really grow, try it out, get feedback from people that you trust, right? That close circle of people that are going to give you that really good feedback. And go from there. And as you grow and get older and you play, different teams and different styles and things like that, you'll change your game and have those tools for the toolbox, as my mom says, to be able to go back to and say, hey, this isn't working, but I can now use this. An example for me is when my freshman year in college, I came in and I was what most people would consider a flopper, right? I would say I'm a calculated flopper for low shots. And I was going, down on my knees. I looked more like an ice hockey goalie. Maybe it's why box works for me. And my coaches were like, this isn't working. The shots are faster, even though I was on US previously, right? Shots were faster. And I just wasn't adjusting as quickly, right? And you can take outside environmental things, however you want to look at it. And they're like, you need to just make saves traditionally low. And it took me a while, but I was like, I can go back to that because I had those tools in the toolbox. Now we kind of deduced after that, I was actually quicker and just needed to flop differently. And then I found my style, but I think I wish I could give you an answer that it didn't depend, but it does. You just have to find what works for you. And I think the biggest thing too is journaling and writing it down. That way you could be like, okay, today coach told me, and I know this seems maybe weird, but okay, coach told me to stand up a little taller or take a step out. It worked in these situations, right? And then you're going to start to be able to figure out what that loop is, and I'll go back to a habit loop, right? Of, okay, the player's coming down here. Okay, I need to hold high here, right? You're going to start to learn to pick up certain things and change your game, because we're in a reactionary position. So the more things that we can kind of fall back on, the better. That was a very long-winded answer. I'm so sorry.
Well, it's a very complex question. It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I talk to goalies all the time, Coach, on my podcast, and you'd be surprised, Megan, at goalies at the college level are still quote unquote figuring it out, right? They're still tinkering with things in their game. As the game evolves, as the shooters evolve, as you as an athlete evolve, right? Like what works for you as a 10-year-old goalie, it actually might not work as a high school goalie. And what works for you as a high school goalie, it might not work for you as a college goalie. So, don't feel like as a goalie, I've got to have it all figured out. That's unneeded pressure on yourself. But, to that point number 2 there, you do need to give it a week of practices, because when you try a new concept, a new idea, something you heard on a coach say at this summit, at first it may feel very uncomfortable, right? Because new things are uncomfortable as we step outside our comfort zone. But, if you give it a week and now I'm making saves better and I feel like I'm a better goalie, great. Then you can stick with it. But if not, then cool, scrap it and go back.
Yeah. I think some other things too. And, if anybody needs this info, you can screenshot or I can send it afterwards. I'm happy to share. Right. Just to go through it. Okay. Right. Make sure you're communicating. And I think a big thing to go over, right, is communication is different in men's field versus women's field versus box lacrosse. So knowing that and where your coach is coming from and their background, and asking those questions will also help. If you have a men's coach that's only coached men's and he's talking about, for example, a coma slide, everybody that just plays women's lacrosse is like, what is that? Okay. So certain things don't add up, but just make sure that you're asking those questions. And another big thing, I don't know if it's a bad habit per se, but something to work on definitely is make sure that you have really great stick skills. I prided myself personally on having the best stick skills on my college team. UMass was phenomenal. And I'm not here to be like, go UMass. I don't mind doing that. I have pride in, the program I played for. But when you work on those stick skills and you're in a situation that you need to come out of the crease or your coach wants you to be able to, your team and your defense is going to be able to be so much more versatile if you have great stick skills. And included in that, by the way, is also outlets or clears and things of that nature. Okay.
Love it. By the way, Rachel, the new
yes.
quote is tools for the toolbox, honey. So that's what we're going with.
There we go. And like I was saying before, right? So find a style that works for you and learn to perfect your craft. Every goalie plays differently, and experiment to create the best yet. Right. And I think watching too, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but watching different goalies. And, I think where lacrosse is right now, it's getting so much more exposure. It is so much easier for you all to find, little tidbits and things to pick up on. And obviously things like this, are great as well. Okay. So some things that are mental, right, that are internal. Okay. A big thing, not being locked in during practices, trainings, and games. And I know we've had some people talk about the mental side of the game too. And if you've all been on those, I don't want to, beat a dead horse, as the saying goes, right? But some awesome advice I was given in college was to pick 3 things to focus on during a drill, and also try to leave the stuff that happens outside of the field, right? Outside the field. I know that's so hard to do, but we're goalies, we're reactionary. We have to focus on so much, right? Try to, sweep everything else to the side for as long as you possibly can. And I know it's, we get a lot of things instantaneously now, right? With cell phones and all that kind of stuff, right? And social media, but really try to focus, and really like funnel the important things and lock in for that period of time. Another, bad habit, right? Something that we want to fix, right? Getting mad at yourself for every mistake and error and letting it sit with you. I think that's something that I look back at, my experience and growing as a goalie, and you know what, I still am, right? There are things that work, that worked for me in college that, hey, I'm getting older, they don't work anymore. Right. And that's okay. You just have to be able to accept it and kind of, move through it a little bit. Right. And to stay liquid, as I kind of said with one of my core values before. Right. Something my mental performance coach tells me all the time is you don't have to feel great to play great. Right. And I know that goes against the saying that isn't proper English, right? Look good, feel good, play good. The reality is that you're going to have days where, this didn't work. My lucky shirt wasn't, dry, whatever it is. Right. And the habit loop might, it takes a turn, or, outside factors happen and affect you, right? We're all human, as far as I know. Anyway, one of my bad jokes. I'm so sorry. Right. And, just take that time to reset yourself. Okay. And the quicker you can bounce back after a setback, the better, right? Use it to refuel and refocus and get back to work. Another thing that I know is so hard when you're younger is you're looking for that outside validation. And what I mean by that is like, did I do good? Like looking for that pat on the back, and sometimes that's not going to happen. And I think, we're all goalies. There's times that I think, if I could see all of you, right, you'd probably all raise your hand, is there's been a time at some point in your career, right, whether you're a brand new goalie or, you're an older goalie or you've coached them or whatever, that you have either been neglected, or as a coach, you're like, I need to do more for my goalies. I didn't do enough. Right. And you're kind of looking for that outside validation to like, be told, hey, I did this good, or to be able to get that. And the hard thing is being able to figure that out on your own. So again, I'll go back to like picking the 3 things that you're going to focus on, right? And focus on that, right? And if you need to go to a coach, right, to hold you accountable for it or ask for advice, I would say this makes better use of everyone's time, right? Is going up and saying like, what are 3 things I should do, that I need to work on, and then work on those things, right? And if you have an idea of those and say, hey, coach, I think I need to work on these 3 things. What do you think? That'll be really great. And going back to journaling as well, right? Writing stuff down that works, doesn't work, being able to tinker it, I think is super important. Right. And I'll go back to is like, find your people. You don't need to ask everybody. And I'm still working on this too. Right. Have trusted people that you talk to, right? Could be parents, family, a really good friend, a teammate, right? A coach, maybe a few different coaches, right? And work on that feedback and that advice that they're giving you versus a flood from a bunch of different people that might be delayed or things like that. And I think the 4th one is really, really big, right? Is right, thinking that the result of the game rests on your shoulders. It's a team effort, and the ball has to go through everybody before it gets to you. And I know that's really hard to think about. And even in my pro game still, I'm like, I should have had that. And that's fine. I'm taking accountability and that's good. But I let it sit for a few seconds. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do better. And I move on. And again, that's also really hard to get to that point mentally too, right? So be kind to yourself as you're working through this process. And remember, because you play because you love it, right? I think that's a huge thing. Okay. Remember why you started to play in the first place, and what you really love about the sport.
Real quick, there's a question, good question, about picking the 3 things to focus on. So Megan says,
Yeah.
if you have, bigger goals that you want to focus on, can you just pick 1 or 2? Maybe we'll just leave it right there. What do you think? I've got an idea about that, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think 1 or 2 is awesome, but just like anything, and I don't want to sound too academic here because I know you're all on holiday break and I hope you soak it all in and enjoy it so much. Break that down more.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna make you better. And I think those big goals are great, right? So I'll give you an example. My goal was to play professional lacrosse, right? And I boil that down now too, is like I want to play at the highest level that I can for as long as I can. But there's a lot of other things that I need to do in order to get there. It's not just going to happen. So I think big goals are awesome. Write them down, have those, journal about them, but really try to nitpick on certain things. And then once you do that and you write it all down, let it go, and then take the 3 top things, right? And you can figure out how that's top, whichever ones, and focus on that.
Yeah. That was going to be my answer as well. And it's so cool. This is a concept that has surfaced now 3 different times in different coaching sessions, right? A sports psychologist, Dr. T, talked about it. Matt Gill talked about it this morning, of picking 3 specific things to work on in practice. And Megan, to your point, maybe your goal is to play, Division I lacrosse, right? But when you go into practice, right, I'm picking 3 specific things of what I'm going to work on. All right. Maybe it's my communication with my defense, or maybe it's just even more specific. Maybe it's my communication with this one girl, right? So you can pick 3 very specific things to work on that then will help you achieve that larger goal. So breaking it down, that was going to be my answer as well. Great one.
Yeah. And I think the best advice I received, well, in terms of this topic, right, was to focus on the things that you can do really well and can control when the things don't go your way. And what I mean by this is my freshman year in college, I'll keep it short because I know I like to talk. My freshman year in college, I wanted everything to go perfectly. And I like to plan everything out and be like, okay, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then that, right? And I was like, I'm not making saves. I hit a point my freshman year, I was like, I am playing horrifically. And it was bad that, and I do not recommend doing this at home, but I couldn't make saves in drills with my goalie stick. So I asked for my coach's field stick, which she was on the US team at the time. So she's like, don't break my baby. And then even that I was struggling. And I was like, I'll just go in with just my gloves, like full equipment, but gloves only. And I was making saves with my hands because I was forcing myself to drive to the ball. Right. So, and she was like, and I was like, well, now I can make saves. And I built my way back up and I was fine, and again, I say that in 30 seconds. It took, a few practices and things like that, but it made me feel better because I was like, if I can get it with my hand, I can get it when I have something else. Again, I do not recommend doing that. This was like a goalie shell drill. It was, I look back, I'm like, I don't know if I was okay personally. But I did it. What the advice that she gave me when she kind of realized that that's the kind of person that I was, and she was like, Rachel, the biggest thing is that there are things that you bring to the table, even when you're not making saves. I was like, but my job is to make saves. And she's like, well, what do you do well if you're not making saves? If you were the only goalie, we can't have anybody else. What are we going to do? What else are you going to bring to the table? And I was like, well, I'm a good communicator. And she goes, yeah, you don't know when to stop talking sometimes. Right. That's why I need timers whenever I do things. Actually though. Right. But she was like, you're a really good communicator. Good. What else can you do? And I was like, well, I clip the ball real well. And she's like, yes, you need the ball to do that. But yes, you see the field, you thread the needle, you do all those things. What else? And I was like, well, I cheer on my teammates. I'm a good teammate. She's like, good, right? Those are the things you can focus on. She's like, and this was, she was on the US team. This is from Sarah Albrecht. She was on the US team. And she was like, when things don't go well for me, I'm not winning draws. I'm not doing things. I'm going to communicate where the ball is going. I'm going to get the ground ball. And that's how I'm going to work, right? I'm going to be a good teammate. And I'm going to set other people up for success. Because if I can't do it and I'm not the best option and we have no other options, I need to make sure I can work in the environment and make other people succeed. And I think that was something that allowed me to kind of redefine what success is. And I think that's super important.
Love it.
So here's some emotional, again, what I consider external things, right? So some bad body language, right? We've all encountered somebody. And I think as goalies, again, I know it's so hard, right? You're the last line of defense. You're trying really hard. Somebody doesn't slide right. Maybe they misunderstood you, whatever's going on, right? And it's showable, right? It shows. Everybody has a tell. Try to identify what yours is. And again, go back to those trusted people that are going to be able to say, hey, Rachel, like when that happens, you look a little mad. I'm like, wait, what? I do? And they're like, yeah, can you fix that? I was like, I'm happy, I swear. Right. And, however that communication needs to happen with your trusted people, right? That's super important to try to change that. Right. Another thing is screaming or being visibly shaken up or upset when things don't go your way. Again, I know it's so hard as goalies, right? We all have that time where we're like, why? Okay. I know it's tough. Okay. Big thing, take accountability and own up to your mistakes, right? Best teams and D units know it's a group effort and it's not just one athlete, right? It's not just one person's issue. Okay. It does take time to get used to. Okay. And if you're younger and somebody's not used to that taking accountability, it can come off as an opportunity for someone to place blame on you. I'm not going to tell you that it's not. But, I think owning your mistakes, it's not just a lesson for lacrosse or athletics. It's a good lesson for life. And I'm not saying you need to apologize for, every little thing. That's not it. But, you'll know and the team will start to also say, hey, I messed up too. And I think that's something that was so cool about my senior year at UMass. The team really was like, I would say, hey, I messed up. I should have had that. Right. And I would do this. And that was my tell of like, that was mine. And I'd look to my coaches too, so that they knew. I was like, hey, that's me. That's on me. And my defenders was like, no, I should have slid. This one didn't go here. I should have been here. I didn't set my hips up accordingly. I didn't step up to ball. We could have talked more. It's not you. And I think that's the really cool thing is when you find those people, right? It's all going to work really well. Another bad habit, people carrying your things, carry your own stuff. If you're younger, okay, by no means am I telling you to carry a giant bag that's 3 times the size of you. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're older, you want to carry your stuff. Okay. And this advice came to me from a college coach when I was going through the recruiting process. And whether you do really well and you like drop your things, or you do poorly and you're like, I don't want to deal with this, you take it. Or you have, whatever it is, take your own stuff. You're the one that played. Now, again, I'll go back to if you're younger and you need help, that's a very different thing, or you're hurt or anything like that, right? There's always exceptions to the rule. So I'm by no means am I telling you like you just hurt yourself really bad and you're like dragging your stuff. Someone can carry it for you. Don't worry about that. And I think another big thing about being a really good teammate, right? You want to support your teammates even when you do poorly, right? Be a professional, right? Turn your feelings into power for your teammates to be able to do really great. I give myself cues. So my box lacrosse example, during training camp the past few weekends for the New England Chowderheads, which is the team that I'm playing pro men's box for, which is super cool. There were some times that I didn't do really well in drills or in a scrimmage. I let in a few. I should have had them. I got pieces of them and they went in, right? Which is really hard. And I took a big deep breath and I was like, okay, what can I do in this situation that's going to make me better? What can I do? If I'm not getting pieces of them, or I'm not getting clean save, I'm not making total save, what can I do? And I decided I'm going to be a great teammate and I'm going to cheer everybody on and I'm going to help everybody, sub on and off the floor, right? It's more like hockey in that kind of sense. And I was like, I'm going to be the best teammate because I can control that. And that has nothing to do with how I play. And so that's just another kind of example. This is something super important too. The best compliment that I received, that was when I was in goal and a goal was scored on me. I reacted the same way as when I made a save. And I think that that's something that is really tough, especially if you're younger and you're going through it, right? You should have had that. Coach told me this, but I'm doing what coach said. Why isn't it working? You're still growing. That's a big reason, right? The goals are not, by the way, you look at hockey, you look at box lacrosse, and the goal grows with you. Okay. And in field lacrosse, we just decide, yeah, we're going to have a 6x6 goal for somebody that's barely 4 feet high. I'm not sure how or why we define success that way for the sport. That's a whole other topic of discussion, but again, you're growing, so that's probably what it is, but be kind to yourself and try to work towards this. Okay. Right. Not being visibly upset. Here's some things too. I don't want to harp on it. I know we're kind of pressed for time and I don't want to take up too much of it. Right. So just making sure, right, strength training, mobility, mental, and working on your reaction time. I think a big thing I want to talk about, one, I'm not a certified strength and conditioning coach, right? Nor am I a certified mental performance coach or anything like that, right? But what I will talk about is something that really helped me is knowing the difference between being flexible and being mobile. Okay. Flexible is I can touch my toes, I can get my hands to the ground, my knees are straight, etc. Right? All of those kinds of things. Mobility is about controlling your flexibility to decrease your chances of injury, right? So you don't want to just stretch to stretch. You want to have a purpose and work on your range of motion, and that's going to help you decrease injuries. Reaction time, a drill I really love is having X's and O's written on them and having a coach rally them at me. Happened my freshman year at UMass, and the assistant coach at the time, she was like, which Williams sister am I, right? Referring to Venus or Serena. And finally, one day I had enough gumption to say, coach, at the end of the day, does it really matter? She goes, nope, get back in there. I'm still going. It's like, you're helping me train for my tennis game, like my tennis match this weekend. I'm like, oh my goodness. Right. And you want to focus on developing fully as an athlete and a lacrosse goalie. And when you do this, you're going to become really great. So again, something, I'm not a certified nutritionist or anything like that, but just some things to really think about and focus on. Okay. And you can screenshot this too, just so you have it. The other stuff was really more talk heavy. Right? Have more of a balanced diet. You can write out what you eat. Some people like that. Some people don't. It's a preference thing. If you don't like it, scrap it. Here are just some ideas. You don't need to take my word as gospel. Okay. You want to make sure that you're hydrating properly. And it's not just about during. During is great. You need to do day before and after. Okay. And really work towards having a solid sleep routine. I know everybody is really like, phone at night. I'm guilty. Okay. But try to decrease that time if you can't decrease it totally. Okay. And try to limit junk food and excess sugar. And that also really helps too. Right. And just treat yourself like you're an athlete all the time, right? Everything that you do impacts everything. And that's super important to think about. How much you sleep affects certain things, right? And going through the recruiting process as well, right? Your grades also affect where you can go and certain things like that. You have more options, the better your grades are. I should rephrase that. This is a big one, coachability and sportsmanship. Okay. Right. The one that I really, really want to talk about, we talked about tools for the toolbox already, because we had a really great question before, right? I think a big thing I want to kind of talk to you about too is when I was in college, it took me a while to kind of decompress after games. My mom was like, make sure that you talk about this. Okay. And take the time that you need. And as you go through it, just try to wean down, like whittle the time down a little bit that it takes you to decompress after a game so that you can be with friends and family. Again, I'm talking in the college landscape, you have tailgates after most games and things like that. There were times where the parking lot would be cleared and my parents would still be there and they'd be like, Earth to Rachel, where are you? But I just needed that time to kind of come down, and then I was good to go and out of Rachel goalie game mode. Okay. And I think something that's really cool too, that one of my coaches kind of left me with in college was about taking your linemen to dinner. Obviously we don't play football. Some people on this call may or may have, and that's great. So you may know what that is kind of entailing, but the linemen essentially are, the people that are protecting, the quarterback, and you're the goalie, and you want to, essentially, make sure that you're showing love to your defenders. Am I saying that you need to physically take them out to dinner? No, but have their back and they're going to have yours. And I think that's so important, and goes about being, not being selfish, right? You really try to interact with your teammates and things like that. And, again, going off of taking accountability, which we talked about. Best advice I received, this came from when I played AAU basketball as a little kid, right? Have a killer instinct when playing, but be a great human being when the game is said and done. And that goes back to like that time and decompressing. And the quicker that you can flip that switch, the better. Does anybody have any questions?
We got questions. First of all, thank you so much. That was a lot of amazing content right there. And if you didn't catch something or want to go back and take a look at that slide, I'll have the replay up. You guys can do that. Question. So you mentioned being, actually, I'm gonna stop sharing so we can go side by side here. You mentioned being a great communicator. Alexis had a question. How do you work up the confidence to speak in the cage? My mouth guard makes me sound funny, and I'm a little intimidated by my team because it's my first season on the team and everyone else has been there for years. I know what to say, but I just can't bring myself to say it. How do you fix it?
Okay, that's a really awesome question. I think, and I might have touched on it on one of the slides, but didn't go. I don't know. I think that there's so much to cover in these things, so
Yeah.
I always want to like throw the kitchen sink at it. But big thing is it's okay to mess up and make mistakes. And I think that's so hard when there's a lot of pressure, right? Pressure on coaches, pressure from other people. You put that self-imposed pressure. I have to be perfect. I have to say these things, and I still get my rights and lefts confused. There are times tryouts, training camp, all these things. I literally was like, ball's left. And they're like, it is? Rach, you good? I'm like, no, the ball's right. The ball's on the right side. Right. And I think it's okay to make mistakes. Again, I go back to that accountability and kind of have fun with it. What I like to say when I'm coaching is it's okay if you're saying peanut butter and jelly. The other team has no idea. Like I'm serious. If it gets you to speak, that's great. It seems like the mouth guard piece might be something that's a little bit tougher. So I would try to get one. I know there's a bunch of different brands that make it where it sits more like a retainer in your mouth. Definitely keep wearing it. Super important because it protects the noggin. But make sure that you try to get one. And I know it might be hard, but you can get one that you can mold yourself. Those are super helpful. And it will help you talk clearer. I think the big thing too is talk to your coaches and see what they want you to say and have that communication sheet. We did that in college. I do that for my teams, and it's super helpful because then everybody's on the same page and it's like a habit loop for communication. It's going to take time to, yes, somebody just said the Sisu mouth guards. Those are solid. And they stay up there, which is great. And I believe you can remold them too. But yeah, the communication sheet is really great. And if a coach doesn't have one, ask them to make one, or you can kind of write stuff down with your teammates.
Love it. Yeah, the Sisu, I've heard SISU, I've heard great things about as well. The other thing too is dentists make custom mouth guards too. I think they're by rule, it cannot be clear. So you just have to have them use like a colored plastic, like white or red or black or something like that, not clear. But I know I grind my teeth at night, so I had them make me a night guard, and it sort of doubles as a it can't be white. So maybe it has to be a color, but it can't be white or clear. I thought it could be white.
I don't think it can have teeth on it either, because those were like a big one too.
Like
Like
shark
people would
teeth.
have people would have like
Yeah.
ones with like teeth on it,
Oh man, they're
which is
making lacrosse
interesting.
no fun, huh? All right, Alexis, hopefully that answers your question. I do love the comment about printing out the list of terms so you and your entire team know exactly. It's like you're speaking the same language, right? And you know exactly what to say in each situation. Although it sounds like she says she does know what to say, so that might not be an issue for her, but that'll be a good tip for other goalies as well. All right, Marnie says, what are your feelings about playing goalie box as a young field goalie?
I love it. There are some things that don't translate, but what I found is that I'm a lot more patient as a field goalie. And I always kind of played back and on the line for field as well. And again, that's my style. I'm not telling anybody that that's a specific way to play. I think if you're going to play box and do it, you know, where it's like real box, you know, and those kinds of things, and you have the pads and the gear and all that kind of stuff, I think it's really great because it's going to teach you to watch the ball and you have to sit back and be so much more reactive. And I think it's really helpful playing women's lacrosse, for me, primarily being able to see the shots in tight. And I'm good at those. And then also from further away too, which is more of step downs for men's. That's also where women's lacrosse is going a little bit as well. If you look at Charlotte North and stuff like that. So I think it helps, and the gear is great. You don't feel anything. So I think it takes away that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. Bob Kinsner, when looking at a coach to help break and fix bad habits, what kind of resume should one look for to ensure that they are finding the right person? What red flags should one look for to know that the coach wouldn't be a good fit?
Ooh, I think somebody that knows the game, you know, I think different places and areas, right? You're going to find different kinds of coaches and stuff like that. So I would just try to focus on somebody that has that, you know, reputation of working really well with goalies. You know, I think some people, you know, prefer if they're, you know, a woman to have a woman's coach. Some, you know, guys prefer guy, like those kinds of things. Coaching wise, I just think somebody that's going to really kind of like mesh well, and work well with the athlete. And I know that just kind of means like, you know, testing the waters a little bit too, if that's an opportunity. But there are people that do virtual goalie training and stuff like that as well. I don't know if I don't want to like plug my business, but like I do that as well. So happy to help. Or, you know, I think even if there's somebody that's reputable that could connect you to somebody in your area that they go off of a reference, I think that would be great too.
Awesome.
That was a lot of answers. I'm so sorry.
All good. All good. Hey, plug yourself by all means. That's what we're here for. I mean, you know, when I bring coaches on the goalie summit, they've been vouched. I've talked with them. They're great. So by all means, what does a habit like a pregame routine? When does a habit like a pregame routine become unhealthy? And do you have any advice for breaking those unhealthy habits? Says Mia.
Ooh, I think realizing if it doesn't work or it's too long, I think being able to tailor it to the time that you have, and something that's going to set you up for success and make you feel good. You know, we're goalies, right? It's hard, really hard to get a shutout. So you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up to feel like mentally and physically ready. So if you're, you know, in a position where, you know, those things feel good and you feel ready to roll going into it, then that's great. If it's something that's kind of deterring you away from that or taking too much like mental capacity or energy, and kind of draining you, right? You want to save all your energy to make the save or be ready for the game and that kind of stuff, then it's time to kind of ditch it.
Yeah. Or if it becomes so like you're so dependent on it, like I need to have this blue Gatorade. And if you don't have the blue Gatorade and it's like, now I can't find a blue Gatorade, you know, I think that becomes a little bit unhealthy to a certain
Yep.
extent. But most of the time, I cannot think of other things besides that in a pregame routine that would be unhealthy. So there you go. Well said. Thank you, says Mia. All right. We're at time. We got a bunch of open questions. Let's see if we can do like a couple more. If everyone can stick around for a couple more minutes. Bridget Cox says, how do I keep myself motivated when I'm trying to improve my play, especially when I'm not getting any live shots because I'm in the off season?
I think being able to find somebody to be able to work with you or give you drills and stuff to do, or watching games and stuff like that is really, really beneficial. You kind of have to find what helps in that sense. I'm going to, just because I know some people might be pressed for time, I'm going to put my contact info in the chat. So if anybody needs anything, you can text me. Just let me know who you are. So I'm not just getting a note like, hey, da, 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 da. Okay. So just going off of that, I'm accessible and always happy to help. So I think, big thing is like focusing on, that mental game too, and hand-eye and realizing like, the stuff that you have accessibility to in the off season, like juggling tutorials, like stuff like this is really great too. Right. Where you're constantly learning and doing those things. And sometimes a break isn't a bad thing either.
Right.
Time away can also help reset you and set you up for success.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily see the motivation, the link between motivation and getting live shots. Right. I mean, there's so many things you can do to practice, but also like motivation and live shots are way different, I think. I mean, you're here, for example, on the goalie summit. I mean, show of hands in the chat, who after attending these sessions feels more motivated to be a great goalie? Who feels more motivated to play? Right. I mean, hopefully there's a lot of hands, right? So you're here. That could help, right? The other thing, hang on, my sister's calling me. All right. The other thing is, what was I gonna say? Oh, I think goals are very much related to motivation. So if you have, very clear goals that you're trying to hit, and like Rachel has said many times on this presentation, you write about them, you journal about them, right? And they're very front of mind. Like that helps keep you motivated. You look at that goal, and that's something that I want, something that I really want. I'm really motivated to achieve that, right? All right, now I know I need to get out there and juggle on the wall, hit the wall for a half hour. So hopefully that makes sense. Bridget, let me know in the chat. All right, next question is from Ella Allen. What are good resources to watch college or pro lacrosse? I occasionally watch sports, but I don't know where to find the Lax.
So, okay, so it was Lacrosse Network. Watch Lacrosse TV I know that's the Instagram and Twitter handle and everything like that. They have old college games on. They have men's, they have women. They're also going to have the box lacrosse, the pro league that I'm in. They're going to be streaming those games as well. I don't know the status of if it's free or paid. That much I don't know. Yes, I just saw somebody said ESPN has the PLL. That's correct. And I think, you can find YouTube has a lot of stuff too. How people have procured that onto there, not my business. But some people put things on YouTube. I know the US national team stuff has been on there. So you have some like national games and stuff like that, the international stuff. But I think even other sports help too. I was such a big fan of watching ice hockey growing up. I'm a huge New York Ranger fan. I'm so sorry if any of you are not. So they had a huge win over the Islanders last night. I'm very happy about that. But I was a huge fan of watching Henrik Lundqvist play. And, does it translate? Yes, no, maybe. But I think watching how he conducted himself in post-game interviews was super important too, to like learn how to grow and be professional in a sense, right? And just watching how he explodes from pipe to pipe. There's some stuff again that like doesn't translate, and same thing with like, there are guys on the call that are like, maybe Rachel said something that doesn't completely translate. If I started talking about 8 meters, you'd be like, yeah, I'm out. Doesn't translate, right? But there are certain things that you can even take, even if you're a goalie that plays primarily men's lacrosse and you're watching an 8 meter, you could watch how a goalie sets himself up and say, hey, I could try that maybe on a step down, that might work, right? So there are some things that are similar. Again, it's taking everything with a grain of salt, and going from there. So I think hockey is a great translation. I think you look at basketball for crossovers and stuff like that. I would not have survived lacrosse if I didn't play basketball growing up. I stopped growing at 5'4" and 3/4 of an inch though. So me as a starting center was not going to cut it past middle school. Even then I was like, hello, looking up at people. So which is no different than the men's box lacrosse team that I'm on. There's a guy that's like 2 feet taller than me on the roster. So, anyway, yeah, that's like other sports work. I think you just kind of, have to take and piece things together and kind of Frankenstein it. But lacrosse is great, whether it's men's, women's, box, sixes, whatever it is, there are things that you can pull from that.
Yeah, and ESPN Plus has a bunch of games. Me and mostly Evan from Team Lax Goalie Rat these days. We make these save edits, so I just put a link to my YouTube channel. You can check that out. That's a great resource if you just want to watch goalies in particular, not necessarily like the entire game, just the saves, which is fun. All right, let's do one more. Mia says, how do you compress after a game? I think you touched on this a little bit, but this one got a lot of upvotes, so let's hear it again.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, like after a game, you're all like riled up, you're like, yes, right. Especially if you do really well, sometimes those are the ones to kind of like come down. It's like really hard to come down off of, because you're so excited, you're so pumped, and then that energy almost has nowhere to go. Right. And I know I talked about, the habit loop or however you want to classify it. I think the really important thing is to almost have one. If looking back at my college career, because like for pro now too, I'm like, okay, time in the locker room, I take off all my stuff, right, for box, and it's heavy, it's a lot, and it takes me a while. So I'm just kind of like chit chat, do this, do that, whatever. Field is it was a little different, and people would kind of like run out really fast. Have that routine, that you go to, so that you can kind of rely on and be able to kind of drop off of that. Maybe it's talking with a teammate, going over like a few things that you did well or things to improve on or stuff like that. Maybe it's listening to music. Maybe it's kind of setting aside a few minutes alone as you're taking all your gear off and stuff like that. Sometimes it's hard, to not be disturbed when that happens. People are coming up to you, great game. Oh, I thought you did this really well. That save was awesome. So it's a little bit hard, but just kind of finding that routine and that place to be in. And I think when things don't go well, I think the most important thing is to kind of realize and look back and be like, pull the 3 things and I'll go back to the 3. What are the 3 things that you did really well? Right. And, I look at feedback that I've received, right, from, pro tryouts, combines, et cetera, right? Something that people always tell me is, Rachel, you're really explosive, right? People would hint that I'm short. I'm like, well, yeah, I'm 5'4". I know I'm tiny, right? That I know. I'm like, I've known for a while. But people would talk about, you don't freak out when things go wrong, and you're a really great teammate, and you act as a professional. When things don't go well, you're still supporting other people. You're still being a good teammate, and you realize when you take accountability, right? And I think those things, sometimes it's hard for people to realize that when you're younger, right? And again, like I said, it can kind of open up the door for blame a little bit, but realizing the things that you do really, really well and kind of being like, this is my signature, like this is who I am, right? And I know there have been people on the podcast, that Coach Damon's done. There've been people on this goalie summit and other ones talking about like your personal brand and who you are, right? And that's why I included the stuff, my core values, what I teach, how I coach, those things. And I think going back to it is, if lacrosse was stripped away or you played the worst game ever, what are people going to say about you and how you held yourself? And I think that's the most memorable thing. You're not going to make every team. You're not going to make every save. You're going to get cut. There's going to be heartbreak. You're going to get released from teams if you have the opportunity to play at the professional level. You're going to be told you're a backup. You're going to be told you're a third string. You're going to be told whatever, right? You could be 4 or 5, right? Men's lacrosse, sometimes there are teams that in a college level that have 5 goalies, which I'm not going to comment more on that. That's little hard to get some playing time in there, right? But you're going to face setbacks. And I think the most important thing is how you're going to work through that, whether it's after a bad game and you need to allocate time for yourself, or it's, you know, you had a really bad moment or a bad few months or whatever it is. You got to just keep digging and keep trying. And don't give up. And I know that sounds really corny, but if you love it, and that's why I go back to, like, you know, why you play in the first place. And I think that kind of stuff is so important. And it gives you something to focus on. Like when things don't go really well, or they go really well, you know, there's a famous baseball player, I believe it was Babe Ruth, and he was like, how I'm going to play, or like a kid could just see me one time, and what is he going to take away from that? What are they going to see? And I look at those things, and it used to upset me when I played really bad, because I was like, I don't want people to see me this way. And then I look at it more as like, no, it's about, you know, are you the person that's like, you know, taking the time, are you being a good teammate, doing those things that sometimes are more memorable, right? And the legacy that you leave. And I think that's more important than saves or anything like that. And I know that's hard to see when you're younger, but just keep plugging away, take that time. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with at any part in life, right? Like if something doesn't go your way, or somebody kind of starts to get a little heated, and maybe there's like an argument or something going on, there's nothing wrong with taking a big deep breath, right? And calmly walking away. And I think that's the same exact thing. It's like after a game, you can do the same version of that to put yourself in a little spot that you need to. So
Beautiful.
that was really long-winded, but
No, that was great. That was great. That seems like a perfect spot to wrap things up. Coach Rachel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the knowledge. Share some love in the chat if you could. Her contact info is in the chat a little bit earlier. If you want to, here, I'll drop it in there one more time just so it's, wait, I got to copy it. I can't.
I got you.
You got it? All right, there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
My personal Instagram did kind of, after I signed my pro men's box lacrosse contract, they did shut it down temporarily. I hope it comes back normally, but all my social media is ravslax26. And then Coach Damon tagged my business one. So that's how you can get a hold of me on Instagram for now. But again, if you want to email, you can text me, whatever you guys need. And I say guys in a, you know, loving way of everybody. I don't just, you know, mean it for men. So, and boys. So, whatever you need, just give me a shout out. I'm totally, you know, happy to help.
Love it. Coach, thank you so much. We'll see you.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone back here in 45 minutes. Final session of the day of the summit, to be exact, with Emily Sterling. Going to be a great one. See you soon. Take care.